Welcome back to Many This is part 7 of my deconstruction of consciousness squared video series on analytic idealism. Maybe you could say idealism, but I would say analytic idealism because it's sort of a direct condensation of a rip-off. What do you want to... a copy, a fanboy series on Bernardo Kastrup's ideas of idealism, right? Okay, maybe that wasn't the best description, but never mind. Please go on and check out the previous parts in this series. It's a good place to start a criticism, maybe not of Bernardo Kastrup, but of the idea in general, because this is sort of a way to see things as those who are fanboying potentially would digest idealism with all its inherent flaws of thinking, leaps of imagination, contradictions, whatever, unbased assumptions and so on, abstraction as and ideas as foundations for understandings of your philosophy and so on, right? So it's quite it's a very complex. The appeal by Bernardo Kastrup to parsimony is ridiculous. Parsimony is also, in my opinion, staying with simple and clear definitions of what you're doing and what you're talking about, right? And how these various terms used fits together in the bigger picture. As is usually the case with idealist Bernardo Kastrup, they just throw around terms as if they're given, right? So if everything is sort of given and understood, why do I need to hear about your philosophies, your presentations? Because there's something you want to clarify that isn't really well understood. Okay, so if you're trying to get to some understanding, the tools you use for that clarification of the understanding needs to be clear, right? That's what I'm saying. You need to have a reduction base, and you need to have very well-defined terms. And you can't just bring in ideas out of nowhere, and you can't appeal to knowledge when you're doing metaphysics, and so on, and so on, and so on, right? It is violated all over the place in analytic idealism, right? And this is just sort of a show-off case where it's just illuminated how incoherent the connecting of the dots is. Okay, let's head into part 7. For some reason, this one is not numbered, so I guess it could be out of order or not belonging to this series, but I'll take it anyway, right? Something from nothing, a paradox explained.
How can something come from nothing, such as all matter arising from the Big Bang?
Okay, so how can something arise from nothing? There is no definition of what is meant by nothing. There's no mention of what is meant by something. It's maybe a talking point of materialists who have been delving into the foundations of physics and quantum mechanics and all sorts of, theories of everything and whatever, right? Big Bang theories and so on. They talk about something from nothing. Then what idealists do, they take this talking point and just move it into their philosophy and say now they're going to talk about it as if it's given and understood what is meant by something and nothing, and for that matter also, right? So it's not. It is sophist in its nature, in the way of doing things here, right? It is sophist in nature. I mean, in my opinion, the vast majority of what pretends to be philosophy is actually sophistry, right? In olden days, it was framed as though sophists are those who want to make the worse argument the better. That's one way of doing it, right? It doesn't really explain much, but it is trying to, in other way to put it, is trying to make some argument that is invalid look like it's valid in order to pull down the valid arguments, right? Trying to move the bricks around, the chess pieces around, without you noticing that, the queen and the king actually, switched places, and now you're checkmate, right? It's how did that happen? Well, I played chess, right? No, you just cheated, right? And that is sophistry. They're trying to appeal to all sorts of fallacies. That is what fallacies is about. It is trying to figure out, is this guy or girl bullshitting me, right? Pinpointing, trying to look for fallacies all the time. Or just straight up holes in the argumentations, or, not, which is also a fallacy, you could say, right? But it's not an explicit fallacy. Just pretending there is nothing that needs to be dealt with there, or something like that, right? It's all over the place when you listen to philosophers, right? Or so-called philosophers, right? They're just hiding in their tax-funded ivory tower in order to make sure they don't have to do manual labor and work night shifts. It's more fun to sit in a university somewhere, getting a wage that would be the same as some night shift worker would earn if they didn't have to pay taxes, right? It's much more cozy. Why would they want to do manual labor? They'll rather sit and spout some philosophical bullshit somewhere in order to keep their their seat in the cozy department, right? Okay.
What sense are we to make of this paradox? If all that exists are things, including all trees, rocks, and humans, for instance, then how could they have a beginning from that which does not exist? This paradox, like others, is most often just a misunderstanding of language or mental framework that obfuscates the truth. But if this goes on unrecognized, you can often be caught in a descending spiral of nonsense, such as positing a theory like the many worlds interpretation, for which there is not only precisely zero evidence, but which is also untestable, making it inherently unscientific, all in order to try to overcome the paradox. The first law of wholes states, if you find yourself in a...
Okay, so what makes something testable, right? That would be, it's untestable because somebody said. It's this appeal to authority. I found something on YouTube. I found something on Wikipedia. It says here it's untestable, so I'm just saying when... What's the basis of all of this, right? It's the inherent mind-body problem. It's the paradox that saying, I am experiencing something outside, which is also an experience. Well, they can't be outside if it's your experience then, right? Then your experience, if you're saying there is an outside, cannot be that outside. So nothing is testable. You can never get to the thing itself, right? I mean, it grows out of the idea of the inside-outside dichotomy, right? You are on the inside, even if you claim there is an outside. So whatever you have is always a representation. It's not the thing itself. So you can test all you want. All you will ever get to is some kind of representation. And you might get to something that is a better description of a representation or a more valid representation. But it's always a representation. So nothing in that sense is testable because you cannot get to the thing itself, right? And you don't even know if there are things themselves. That's an axiom. That's an imagination. That's an abstraction. So you're trying to prove your abstractions using representations of abstractions. It doesn't work, mate, right?
Hole, stop digging. There exists no argument that is strictly in favor of the materialist hypothesis, which leads to this paradox, as we learned from the last video, matter versus mind, the evidence. To claim that something can come from nothing, or to claim that consciousness can arise from matter, are statements that arise only because materialism is a false mental framework that necessarily leads to such paradoxes.
It's this thing that it's a valid criticism. Materialism is stupid. It's based on naive realism, right? So naive realism is a flawed, paradoxical kind of understanding that if it's not challenged, you will end up with a hard problem, and you will end up with illusionists and eliminativists, or whatever they're called, right? They'll try to argue consciousness away rather than go the other direction and say, maybe all I have access to is my experience, right? Because they cannot get to the idea that whatever you call the outside cannot ever be something you can access, right? And then the next question would be, well, why am I thinking of an outside? Well, good question. Where the hell did that come from, right? Because if you only have an inside, then there is actually no inside from the ground floor, from the starting point, because you created it. It was your imagination that created that inside-outside dichotomy. So there is no inside-outside dichotomy anymore, right? So if you have an inside, if you want to get back to that dichotomy, there is only one way, in my opinion, to do it in a rigid and careful and honest way of doing philosophy, which is saying, I am establishing it axiomatically. I am working from the idea that some of parts of my experience are representations of an outside. If you're creating an outside and none of my experiences are any kind of representation of that outside, then why the hell would I need an outside? So if I create an outside, it's in order to give some kind of meaning to my experiences. But just because I came up with the idea of an outside doesn't mean all of a sudden an outside appears, right? It's still an abstraction. It's still an idea. That's all I can get to, right? And I would also say, as I've said countless times now, I think, then if you step out of your ontology, which is a description of your experience, that's an ontology, right? If you try to step out of your ontology, that's the last step in that chain of argument. It stops there. You cannot say, I will imagine an outside, and now I'm going to start to imagine what might be in that outside. You can't do that, because then you're basing an imagined aspect, or you're imagining something that is based on an imagination. Then you're building cloud castles, right? Then you're imagining something that is based on an imagination that is based on an imagination. And then you can keep going, just like Bernardo Kastrup does, right? That's meta-philosophical rules I am setting, at least for my own philosophy, right? And if I listen to other people doing philosophy, which is also an axiom, that I'm saying, okay, I'm going to treat this particular experience as a representation of something that is similar to me outside myself that I do not have access to. But I have access to these sounds that I have chosen to interpret in this particular way, which also is an axiomatic interpretation, right? That, where was I going? When I communicate, I am still using these sounds and these tastes and these colors and so on, the qualia, in order to get to an understanding of what is going on. So I'm basing my whole picture of a reality, if that's what we want to call an outside, on my representations. My reality is my interpretation of my representations, right? I interpret this as a human being. I interpret that as a car. I interpret that as a tomato. And it comes with certain preordained ideas I have that I might refute or ditch if I don't want them. But they are my interpretations, right? At least I have chosen to go with these interpretations, whether they be good or valid or whatever, right? And what control mechanism would I have to use in order to figure out whether or not I should or should have this experience, or I should or shouldn't have this interpretation? Well, it's all up to me. I can't let my experiences tell me how I should understand my experiences, right? So I can't let somebody else, if I create the idea of somebody else, tell me how I should understand things, right? And this is obviously what a guy like this presenter and if, in my opinion, also Bernardo Kastrup, they want to circumvent your ability to say, I need to think for myself. They want you to sort of put yourself on hold and just be receiving the message, right? Be careful. Always think for yourself. Don't listen to me. Think for yourself, right? I'm here to tell you. You should think for yourself, right? And if anything, my presentations and my philosophy is an appeal, implicit appeal. By presenting you with my philosophy, I am extending the idea of thinking for yourself. If anything, that's my takeaway, right?
Take a moment to think about what it is possible for you to know. When you strip everything else away, what is the...
Well, now we're going into epistemology, right? What does it mean to know? You can't just throw these terms around, mate, right? You have to define things. And if that definition, if using words to define that definition, you need to define those words, and so on, and so on, and so on, until you reach some kind of reduction base where definitions can go no further, right? From where they can go no further. This is the last step. You reach that same bottom of definitions every time, and you can't go no further, right? I would say it's the colors and the sounds and the taste and so on, right? You can't go any further than that. And another aspect is to say you should be able to trace any definition, any term, back to that reduction base. If you cannot do that, you cannot trust the philosophy, right? So what does it mean to know? It has to be traceable back to the reduction base. There is no reduction base in this system here, right? It's just a lot of fancy terms thrown around, right? In order to convince you to, don't look at materialism, bad. Idealism, good. It's all about love, right? Oh, come over here. Communism.
Only thing that remains that we can perceive for an absolute certainty. The only thing that we can know is that we experience. We have nothing else outside of experience that we can know directly.
No, but is all we can know is experience, but then you're just referring to all of it. Because all of experience is all you have then, right? Then all of it is knowing, but then you're just equating the word experience with knowing now. Why do you need to call my experience knowing? Oh man, right? So you're just switching for now I'm going to call it knowing instead, right? But you're just taking all of it. And rather than saying, I'll stop calling it experience. Now I'm going to call it knowing. There's nothing new in that. You're just switching the terms, right? Creating more confusion. In fact, I would call it sophistry. If you just need to, I'm now going to change the wording over here, right?
We experience our internal world of thoughts and emotions, and we experience the world.
Internal world. Now it sort of appeal to that dichotomy again, right? Where the hell did that dichotomy come from, right? I have never seen any of these idealists or Bernardo Kastrup or anyone giving me a rigid argument for how they all of a sudden can start to talk about something outside their experiences. What is it? There are colors, there are sounds, there are tastes, and so on. What is it about them that make you say, oh, I guess there's something outside, right? It's not even I guess, it's because of this, there must be an outside. Because that's what they're appealing to if they're not saying, I am choosing to go with the idea of an outside, which would be the axiomatic approach that I am adhering to, right? Which is basically saying, yes, I am doing so, but that doesn't mean that I've all of a sudden proven that there is an outside, right? They don't even give me any, argument or any axiom, anything. It's just like it's there. Of course it's there implicitly, right? That is sophistry. It's actually much worse than materialism. Because materialism, whenever they claim something, they need to have empiricism, right? But these people, idealists, they think they have some kind of transcendental, whatever, backdoor access to some world that can't be experienced. At least materialists are limited by empiricism. Idealists seem to try to let go of empiricism and then wander into abstractions as far as the eye can see, right? And they'll come up with all sorts of harebrained ideas about what the hell is going on up there, right? Which is completely disconnected from any experience. And that's why it can work. Because if people can't experience it, they have to go and ask Bernardo, right? But they want there to be this fairy tale land out there that is pure honey and love and rainbows, right? And all coming together. Oh, we're all in it together. That nobody's left out. Oh, everybody feels and no one left behind or anything, right? It's an appeal to, I want to be a part of it. I don't want to be outside. I don't want to have my own opinion. I want to be in the big one opinion. So I don't have to think for myself, right?
World only through our perceptions, which are all in our mind. We know nothing directly outside of mental experience itself. From this, we can also know for a certainty that the primary aspect...
Okay, so why are you not sitting inside that bubble then? Why are you showing the bubbles from the outside if you can't get there, man? I mean, they have no checks and bounds for their philosophy, right? There is no limitations. They have disconnected themselves from a reduction base or any kind of coherent chain of arguments or anything, right? I am just floating out into my external world of imaginations and thoughts, right?
Aspect of our experience is consciousness. For without consciousness, we could not experience. We can quiet our mind.
What? No. Now you're screwing with the terms made, right? You're making category errors here. Consciousness is an artificial, synthetic term used to say, I'm talking about all that goes on, that I have access to, which would be colors, which would be cognitions, which would be abstractions, which would be theories and thoughts and memories and imaginations of the future. And you can go on, right? All that which I have access to, rather than mentioning all these 38 different things, I'm just going to say consciousness, right? But then what they do is, then they say, everything is made of consciousness. And if you didn't have consciousness, you wouldn't have thoughts, right? They are using the umbrella term, which is just a term, in order to say everything is made of this term now, right? Just like I pointed out before, like it's saying like It's like something like pointing to a car and say, or pointing to an object and say, all these things that are put together this way, I will call that a car. Oh my God, it's all made of car now, right? No, that doesn't work. You can't give it a term and then say it's all made of that term. That is a violation of basic understanding, right? Another example is like it's sort of a more experiential metaphor, right? That I'm sitting here and I'm looking at various objects like my television and my table and my shelf and whatever, right? Chairs, lamps, loudspeakers, television. And I'm saying, I'm going to call this that I have direct access to, I'm going to call it my living room, right? And then I would take this incredible step of saying, I guess it's all made of living room then, right? And then as an idealist, I would take an even more crazy step, which is, I guess there might be something outside this living room. I guess it's all living room out there, right? That is idealism. That is analytic idealism. It's fucking crazy, man, right? It's one craziness upon another craziness. And when they've got out there in that external living room they don't have access to, but it's all living room out there, right? They're going to tell me about all the chairs and all the subjective living room that is responsible for my living room, and whoa, man, right?
To a significant degree, leaving only our conscious awareness, but we can't experience without consciousness. From our individuated...
We can't experience without consciousness. We can't have any idea of consciousness if we didn't have an experience. Consciousness is an abstraction. It's an artificial idea of a description, an umbrella term that says all that I have access to, I'm putting in this big bag I call consciousness. But that doesn't mean you all of a sudden can start to say everything is made of consciousness. And if there wasn't consciousness, I wouldn't have any experiences. That is fucking stupid, man, right? And it's downright manipulative.
Perspectives. Our minds, through our senses, filter reality, which is our own awareness of the world. This was described more fully in the videos How the World Works and Our Two States of Being. Note that in the materialist paradigm, everything is a thing. For instance, rocks, trees, and people are things. There exists nothing that is not a thing. Whereas in our direct experience, we have things that are objects of our awareness. But we also have awareness itself, which is not an object, but is rather the subject of awareness. Awareness is the only witness to everything as viewed from our individuated subject-object duality. Awareness...
Just thought that maybe the reason why materialists and scientists really cling on to science needs to explain everything, including the hard problem and so on, is they understand instinctively all these crazy people who are just waiting for science to make some kind of problem or point out something, there's a paradox somewhere, some problem, and then they're going to, aha, you're wrong, therefore idealism is correct, right? And they don't want to get sucked into this crazy imaginary world that these people seem to be living in, right? I'm not saying they're not necessarily pointing out limitations or problems in materialism. That's what they are actually using as a stepstone to convince you to jump to this other part in that dichotomy, which is idealism, right? And then promising, rainbows and honey everywhere and love, right? And we're all in it together. There's only one opinion because there's only one mind, right? So you don't need to think for yourself. Come over here where you can just be a part of the communist, dictatorship, right?
Does not change, but all of those objects of awareness...
You could very well argue, I would say, that science is an appeal to individualism, right? You need to be an individual in order to do science. You can't just suck some science out of an external world of whatever, right? And that's also an aspect that, of course, Bernardo Kastrup is aware of that. And that's why he appeals to, well, you have to go and do the science for the big mind. You have become a dissociation so that you can be scientific and write books so that the big mind knows what the hell is going on, right? So this is sort of the, plastering the holes in the philosophy of idealism so that it looks like there is no problem anywhere, right?
Awareness, all of those things are only temporary manifestations of the activity of consciousness, which is what all things are under the idealist paradigm. They do not have independent existence. This means that from the perspective of awareness, there is only its own activity, like a flashlight that cannot be shown on itself. Another way to say this is that things arise as objects apart from the subject, that which isn't a thing, but is the witness and simply is existence, knowing itself.
Yes.
Which is
the one eye that looks upon everybody. There's only one mind. It's sort of this Illuminati thing, right? Fuck off, man, right? There's one thing, right? You can't be an individual because you're all a part of it. I'm sorry, but you have to accept there is no you. There's only the one thing, right? And you're just a siphoned off little dissociation of the big mind because the big mind wants to know what the fuck is going on. So it wants you to go and collect data and be scientific about it, right?
is to say that something can come from no thing, and the paradox disappears.
But I'm more like, I would turn that around and say, why would there be nothing rather than something? What is the idea of nothing? What is that? Because there seems to be something everywhere, right? I have no idea of nothing, right? If I close my eyes or put my hand over my eyes, right? What do I see? Do I see nothing? Right? Do I see nothing? No, I see something black or something like black, right? That's what I see. I see black. Is that nothing or is it black? If it's in an experience, well, then I'm experiencing black then. How would I know the difference between experiencing nothing and experiencing black? I wouldn't, right? There is an experience of black, even if it's an experience of nothing, it's an experience of black that I call nothing, right? So why would you say that would be nothing rather than something? Because there's experiences everywhere, right? If you're saying there is an experience, it's usually because you're using the notion of space in order to say, oh yeah, but I'm not experiencing the space between that experience and that experience. But if space is a part of your mental scaffolding in order to stretch out your experiences for whatever reason, then it's just because of the stretching of space within your mind. Right? And therefore you talk about this nothingness maybe, right? I don't know. But I can't get to any nothing anywhere, right? It's just an imagination. It's an abstraction, the nothingness, right? And it's all this. It's these kind of, slightly fluffy materialist talking points that are sort of being grabbed by idealists in order to strawman an argument into following idealism, right? When you look closely, most of what he presents are criticisms of some fallacious, according to their standards, right? Philosophy, right? The materialists, they constantly pound out how bad materialism is, and therefore love and rainbows in our camp, right? It's pure sophistry. If you need, as I've said before, if you need to point fingers and some other philosophy in order to make your own philosophy smell better, there's something wrong with your philosophy, right? When you're doing good philosophy, you wouldn't care about somebody else's philosophy because it would actually be a circular argument, right? You would have to go through all of the steps of that philosophy in order to figure out, okay, it's fallacious. Then you will have to wind it back to your own starting point, but then it would be eliminated, right? You can't go all the way and say, no, it's flawed, and go back and say, I'm going to fill out the holes that was incorrect in the other one, right? So you're taking a fallacious metaphysics or ontology, then changing a few things here and there, and then rainbows appear, right? Bullshit.
This is the non-dual understanding of existence. With that, please like, subscribe, and check the notification bell for Consciousness Squared.
Okay, so what I don't like is a philosophy that tries to sell you something that makes you feel good, right? That's the snake oil salesman, right? Oh yeah, this, elixir that I've, cocked up in last night, right? It is going to make you feel like, you can fly on whatever, right? This philosophy of mine will make you feel so great, right? That is so fucking manipulative, right? Who says that's going to be the conclusion? Well, if we say that philosophy is going to make you feel bad, that is also manipulative, right? Maybe it would appeal to, people who think that, it has to be bad before it can get good or something like that. Don't tell people what they should feel or what they should think. Give me the philosophy. Give me the steps you're doing in order to get from A to B to C to D and so on, right? Give me don't throw these stars and eyes and thoughts of moving about and text there and some music and pure emotional manipulation, right? Actually, I'm happy that most of these idealists are halfway stupid and think this is going to fly, right? Because they're basically pointing out how bad they are at doing philosophy, in my opinion, right? And they're possibly not even doing philosophy. They're just cherry-picking something that inevitably, or in the best of their understanding, will lead people to go to where they want them to go to a particular understanding, right? And in this case, I would bet you it's God. The conclusion, at some point, Bernardo Kastrup is going to say God, and they are all happy, right? When they say God, it's the same as saying mommy was not crazy, right? That's what it's about, in my opinion. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. People want philosophy that leads to where they can feel good, where they don't have to rock the boat, where they don't have to challenge their parents. You have no idea the power that parents have over human beings, right? Their parents have an enormous power over them, right? And usually also wives of men, the wife will take over the power from the mother. The mother and the wife of the man will try to, the wife will learn what the mother does in order to control the son. Then the wife will take over that control mechanism. And for centuries, millennia, this has been religion, right? It has been religion. It has been God, right? Now it has been challenged by somebody saying it's government, right? So now it's welfare state instead, right? It isn't more complicated than that. Nobody wants to end up becoming a Friedrich Nietzsche, sitting there alone in some cottage somewhere, half crazy, writing books nobody reads, right? What kind of life is that? right? So if you're doing rigid philosophy, you might, if you look at it, most of the male philosophers in history, they were never married, right? They sat alone somewhere and wrote books because they were isolated, because they are pointing out all the bullshit people are living from, right? That's what the philosopher usually ends up being, pointing out the bullshit, and then they reject they killed Socrates, right? They didn't want this guy running around telling, poisoning the youth and whatever bullshit, right? Okay, this is the end of this presentation. I don't think I have any further to say about it. There was a comment on the last video, part 6 of this. Some guy who just, there are people who are very, very, eloquent in their way of putting words together. But I'm also kind of, it can get a bit too, smart, right? So, but I thought it had a bit of a humor to it, right? So I don't think it was to be taken necessarily completely serious, right? Though there were sort of serious undertones, right? But that's another thing. Please leave comment. Please share, like, and subscribe. Help me get 2 more viewers. It seems I've got some traction here recently. I get a higher frequency of new subs to the channel, but I would like some more likes and some more comments. That will help me get the videos out to a bigger audience. So all of my almost 300 listeners or subs, would you please give me a like, a subscribe? Of course you don't have to subscribe because you are already subscribed, but a like and give me a comment, and even link it up to whatever your other social media you have, right? And consider a donation. Links below, and also links on the board, which you can also, there should be a link to the board below where you can go and check out crypto links. If you are into cryptos, you can donate that way also. And beyond that, see you in the next one. Have a nice day.